You're watching Sun TV, broadcasting to the world from studios in Providenciales in the beautiful by nature Turks and Caicos Islands. Sun TV, your source for real news as it happens.
In our headlines today, Governor Beckingham says the UK may be willing to re-examine the $260 million loan guarantee to the TCI. The Chamber of Commerce told that the governor does not have the power or responsibility to start getting into detailed negotiations with individual companies, investors, or other individual application or business licenses. And the governor stated that without population growth, it is difficult to see how small businesses in the TCI can really grow. I'm Toddleen Daffrelin, and thanks for watching this special Sun TV report in which we give you detailed account of what the governor told members of the Chamber of Commerce. Governor Peter Beckingham says the UK will be willing to look at renegotiating the $260 million loan guarantee, despite the fact that there are mixed feelings among local banks about coming to the rescue of the Turks and Caicos Islands government. Addressing a meeting of Chamber of Commerce at Beaches Resort and Spa on Monday, November 4th, Beckingham said that based on his conversations with UK Minister Alan Duncan, he believes the Department for International Development would consider relaxing the terms and conditions of the loan, which is widely felt to be causing financial and economic hardship to the people of the Turks and Caicos Islands. In 2011, the UK extended essential help to the TCI by providing a $260 million loan guarantee to keep local government functioning. The guarantee expires in the year 2016, but most of the money guaranteed by the Turks and Caicos Islands government between now and then will have to go towards repaying that loan. During the Chamber of Commerce meeting, private banker Keith Brent asked the governor about the loan and its tight schedule, and the governor said there would be nothing to stop the TCIG from going to the UK with the sensible proposal. Here is the exchange between Brent and the governor.
Governor, briefly at the golf course just after you arrived, Meridian Trust. I know you're relatively new here, but one of the problems on the island is the amount of tax dollars that are flowing back on the loan guarantee. Do you believe that DFID or the FCO is looking at reducing that dollar amount so some of those tax dollars could go into the local economy, such things as relieving the crowding at Clement Howell by building another high school, which is desperately needed here?
I fear that the answer I'm going to give isn't the one you want, but the message I was given very clearly from DFID before I came out is that that 2016 deadline is a real deadline, and they don't intend to change their position on it. I think the only thing I would add to that is that obviously were the TCI government to go to DFID with a serious proposal which had been underwritten by commercial banks or others, I'm sure they would look at it. But at the moment, the position is very clear in the eyes of Alan Duncan, the minister who I mentioned earlier and who I know, having met one or two other businessmen here recently, that he doesn't seem to be the most popular person in town, but his message was very clear that it was agreed that 2016 would be the date for a renewal.
I'm certain that your visit there tomorrow will be very informative for you. I'm also the president of the local rugby union and get out there fairly frequently myself, right. So I think you may change your mind after visiting the premise there. With the foreign offices wish to impose that onerous tax burden on the country.
Yeah, I should say it's DFID really, but
DFID, yes.
Yeah.
If the local banks which are providing the funding were willing to reconsider some of the British guarantee, would DFID be willing to reduce the amount of loan repayment on the tight schedule they have? Because right now, if that money was recirculated in the country, it would provide a lot of, employment and the potential for people here to pay not only their food bills, but also
Yeah,
their mortgages, which is a concern
Right,
for the lending institutions.
There would be nothing to stop the TCI government going to DFID with a proposal along the lines you've mentioned. And I should say, I should have mentioned it earlier, I had a meeting with the Financial Industries Association, and last week I met one or two senior bankers in TCI who were talking along the sort of lines you've mentioned. Some of them, I have to say, gave me one message, that it would be quite possible to put a new set of proposals which could change the dynamics. Others said to me that no banks would be interested in coming to, as it were, coming to the aid of TCI before 2016. I don't know, but I said to the Financial Industries Association that I would be very interested in following up that discussion.
The governor was also very direct about the things that he can do and the things that he can't do. He again took the opportunity to stress that he will be leaving the decision-making up to the elected ministers of the Turks and Caicos Islands government.
Try and explain to you, because I think it's important to say what perhaps I can do and what I can't do in this position that I'm in here in TCI. What I perhaps first of all should say, at the risk of sounding negative by starting with the can't do's, but I think it might be quite important to set that out. I don't envisage in the role that I have, and indeed I don't have the power in the role that I have or the responsibility to start getting into detailed negotiations with individual companies, with individual investors, or over individual applications, business licenses, whatever. There is an elected government, and as I made it very, very clear when I spoke to the House when I first arrived, and as I made it very clear to the Cabinet in my first meeting, they are the elected government. There is a Minister for Finance, there is a Minister for the Environment, and so on. And it is those ministers under the Premier who have a particular responsibility for certain issues. So, for example, this afternoon I had a meeting with Minister Missig, Amanda Missig, the Minister for the Environment and Home Affairs, and we talked about planning applications. And I can't, in the position that I'm in, I have no constitutional power or authority to intervene specifically on behalf of a particular company or organisation in a planning application. That is, there is a procedure, there is a planning board, and I gather, having talked about it this afternoon to the Minister, she has the power to overturn a decision in discussion with the Cabinet, of which of course I'm a member and indeed chair, but there is a clear procedure for planning applications, and I don't see it, and I don't know whether this will be a disappointment or a sign of great pleasure amongst you, but I don't see it as my responsibility to get involved in a detailed discussion on, for example, a case of an individual planning application. But, and I think this is where the distinction is quite important, and I should say that having only been here just literally 4 weeks tomorrow, these things take time to get the feel of, to adjust and to sort of edge towards. But I do see that I have a role in enabling and, as it were, nudging forward business for the betterment of everyone in this country.
Governor Beckingham said he has no problems meeting with the companies and individuals, but he stated that there will be certain limits.
Slightly difficult concept to try and get across, or not a concept, but a relationship. And I try to think of a comparison. I think the best one I could think of, and I'm certainly not saying it's a particularly good one, and I fear it might sound slightly pompous, which it's not intended to, but perhaps the best comparison is taking the example of a company where you have an executive chairman and you have an executive CEO. That is not necessarily a model that I know, certainly in the UK, people are particularly fond of. But in a sense, I would see my role as being the executive chairman, and the country has an executive CEO in the shape of the Premier.
The governor, who assumed office last month, also told business owners about a recent meeting which he had with Carnival Cruise Line in Miami. He noted that there were certain issues with Carnival needed to get resolved with Turks and Caicos, and they even hinted about building a cruise terminal in the Dominican Republic. This, he said, would have serious implications for the island's capital of Grand Turk.
And I'd like to think that in a very tiny way I have contributed to the direction of travel for that company. The other example I'll give, I will name the company because I don't think there's any point in being coy about it. Before I came out here, I went to see Carnival, and EJ said very generously in his introduction to me that I was an exceptionally humble person. Well, I'll show that I'm not entirely humble, EJ, and my wife sometimes tells me off for being far too humble about things. But I was particularly pleased when I went into Carnival, or rather afterwards, because they in turn had a meeting with ministers in London just last week, one of their senior representatives for the United Kingdom, and he said that I was the first governor of any overseas territory to take the trouble to go and see them in Miami before coming out. Not only previous governors here, but obviously governors from BVI and the Cayman Islands and other places. So that's my bit of non-being humble for this evening. And as a result of going in, I saw the chairman of the company, who's, as you will know, a pretty senior businessman in the United States with a huge investment in the cruise business, and had a very instructive and useful discussion, firstly with him and then with some of his executives, about the importance or otherwise of TCI to Carnival. And without going into any details, which are neither appropriate nor particularly interesting, it became clear from these discussions that Carnival are looking for some movement on various issues. And I hope that as a result of that discussion, and now talking to the Cabinet and talking to one or two particular ministers, we can begin to edge forward and to develop the concerns that Carnival have. I mean, they pointed out to me last week that they're building a new cruise stopping point, or a new port entry for them in the Dominican Republic, and they pointed out, I suspect slightly tongue-in-cheek, that they could of course move a lot of their current arrivals.
Governor Beckingham, who was last based in India, said that in another few months he will be submitting a report on the TCI to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. The report will be a positive one.
It's important to try and get over to the Foreign Office and to the Department for International Development how TCI is or is not developing, where the strengths and the weaknesses of the business community is, and how working together we can improve the business opportunities in TCI. The businessman that I saw this afternoon said to me that he worried that there were misperceptions, there were the wrong ideas about what was happening here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that gives you a little further insight into the way I see my role developing. It is very early days. As one businessman said to me this afternoon, he got the impression that I was very keen to listen and to be all ears, and I spent a good bit of time talking to him about his perceptions of the way business can develop here. Certainly in the next few months I intend to listen very carefully. After a couple of months or so, it's a tradition in the Foreign Office, which I gather they want me to continue, to submit to the Foreign Minister and to others a short sort of report giving first impressions of the country that you're working in, and I intend to do that. I've already started thinking about what I might say about my first impressions, which have been, I must say, overwhelmingly positive, above all with the warmth of the welcome that everyone has given me here, bar none, from the Premier down. But I will be, in a few weeks' time, giving some, as it were, first impressions to the British government.
Immigration is one of the most controversial areas affecting the Turks and Caicos Islands, and the governor said he will be meeting with Immigration Minister Donhue Gardner and discuss some of the issues in that regard. According to the governor, although population growth is politically unpopular, it is something that has to be seriously examined. Well, that's our Sun TV News Brief for today. Join us again tomorrow when we bring you real news as it happens, directly to your computer, mobile device, or smartphone. If you know anyone living overseas who would like to keep up with what is happening in the Turks and Caicos Islands, get them to email us at sun@suntci.com so we can add them to our mailing list to get Sun TV News. Thanks for watching. I'm Toddleen Zafferlin.